Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
All right, I'm going to take a look at the participants since it's already right after 1, and I'm going to do roll call. But first, welcome everyone to today's Safe Harbor Commission meeting, and I will go through the commission members' names just to do attendance, if you don't mind, just saying that you were present. So, Teresa Schleifer.
Good afternoon. I'm here.
Great. Diane Scoggins. Hi. April Hale.
Yeah.
Hi. Judith Fouts.
I am here.
Irene Munn.
Hey, everybody.
Jane Neal.
I'm here.
And Grant Thomas.
Here.
All right. So given the attendance, we definitely have a quorum. And I will go ahead and call the meeting to begin. Do we want to, I guess I'll start with approval of the agenda. But first, I just want to make sure that the members in attendance have all received a copy of today's agenda. I'm getting some nods. Great.
Yes.
And does anyone have any suggested corrections at this time? Okay. Well, with that, then I will entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Okay. So all in favor of approval of the agenda, please signal by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. So moved. The next quick agenda item is approval of the minutes from December 7th, 2023. So just to confirm, each of the members has received an advance copy of the minutes from December. Is that right? Seeing lots of nods. Okay, does anyone have any corrections? Okay. Well, then I will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from the December 7th, 2023 meeting.
So moved. Second.
Okay. With that, all in favor of approval of the minutes, please signal by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Motion carries. Let's see. Okay, for general updates and announcements, which is the next item on the agenda, I think all of us on the commission know, if you don't, that tomorrow is crossover day in the legislative session. I will make sure I've got Emma and Emily. I see them here. I know that there's been ongoing communication between Emma and Emily and the commission members, but they also will be sending out any legislation that would involve our work that should be flagged for you, just to make sure that you're aware of the process and any concerns that you may want to flag for the sponsor as it moves through the chambers. But ladies, is there anything about where we are with legislation that you'd want to flag now in lieu of just an email update afterward?
I'll just say that there's been a lot of attention on human trafficking initiatives and especially CSAC-related issues in the legislature this year. So we're still kind of gauging where everything's going to be at. We'll have a better idea on Friday morning. but it will likely be a very lengthy list for you guys to review. And if you have any questions on that list, we're happy to sit down and chat about that.
Thank you. And does anyone have any questions at this stage that they may have for Emma and Emily, just to be on the lookout, or any legislation you'd want to discuss that you're already aware of? Okay. Okay, well, we will circulate that to the members so you can take a look at what is on deck for this year. Let's see, for standard order of business, we're going to go ahead and move into our presentations and updates from our partners. So let me make sure that Melissa Barwick, the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of Finance with DHS, and the DFAC CFO is available.
I am, yes.
All right, well, Melissa, it's all yours if you want to start.
All right, well, hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about the Safe Harbor budget, and also going to give you an update on what we're looking at for the amended 2024 budget, as well as the 2025 budget. So keep going from this. I think we discussed this last time, that there are two kind of pots of money that are appropriated to Safe Harbor. One being the Safe Harbor for Sexually Exploited Children Fund. That's a separate fund within the state treasury, and that's the one that is for purposes of providing care, rehabilitative services, residential housing, health services, and social services to sexually exploited children and to a person, entity, or program eligible pursuant to criteria set by the Commission. And that is adjusted annually based on receipt of funds from certain fees that y'all are aware of. And then state general funds are where the Governor and General Assembly can appropriate additional funding in excess of what is available for appropriation from that Safe Harbor Fund. Next. So for the state fiscal year 2024 budget, in which we have about one more month left in Q3, for your Safe Harbor funds, the current year Safe Harbor fund, so what was included in the 2024 appropriation, and that is usually, I believe it's on a year, might be 2-year lag based on collections, is $200,199. And then we also had a rollover of some prior year Safe Harbor funds of $487, and that includes some interest earned on those prior year funds. So if you don't spend the funds within the year that they're appropriated, we do have to go through a process with the Office of Planning and Budget to get approval to roll over those funds to the next year, but there's also some interest that we gain from that. So that total funding is, with that included interest, is $688,125. And then the contract with CJCC to administer those funds out to the recipients that are chosen by you all is $661,790, which means about $26,000 remaining. And so I guess that is really what we can do is that delta, that's $26,000, we can again ask to reserve those funds for next year and add them to next year's total contract amount, if that is what works best for everyone. And then you also have state general funds that are included in the base budget this year, and that is for the caption was to assist in the rehabilitation of children, youth, and adult victims of sexual trafficking. This is for Grace's Place. The base appropriation was about $3.4 million. But that total contract cost for state fiscal year 2024, including startup cost, was $6,091,380. So there is a delta there of about $2.7 million. So we did request additional funding from the Office of Planning and Budget in both amended state fiscal year 2024 and state fiscal year 2025 to support the full cost of that operation, or those operations. I just wanted to show the state budget cycle. I'm sure that y'all are familiar with this, especially if you're going to and meeting with legislators and others at the Capitol. But kind of point out where we are. So we have crossed with amended 24, the conference committee met on, I believe, Monday. And so that the House and Senate and a representative from the governor's office agreed on that conference committee amended budget. And so now we're just waiting for final signature, in which case that will be official. We have not yet, the House or the Senate, passed what we call the big budget, or the base budget for the next state fiscal year 2025. So I'm going to say January and February there. It just kind of depends. I mean, we're still technically in February for what, a day and a half more. But we will expect some movement now that that amended 24 has been agreed to. We have, I still think we need to present in front of the Senate there, but we'll expect some movement on that coming up soon, because, you know, the one thing the legislature actually has, the one thing the legislature has to do, if they do nothing else every session, is at least pass a budget. So we can't get out of the session this year without that. So we will just keep watching. As you go to the next. This is more in depth. We don't have to talk about this, but I did include it in case we could send it out, just to kind of talk through the process here. And again, checking through where we are now with the amended budget. And I'm sorry, I'm realizing now on this next slide, I did not update with the conference committee information, but I'll just speak to it. So in the amended 24 budget, the House agreed with the governor's recommendation, which was our request for full funding for Grace's Place. The Senate also agreed, and so in the conference committee, we are getting that 2.7. So that red number you saw on that previous slide, it's going to be a zero. We are good on that front now with this additional appropriation from the General Assembly and the governor. So that is great news. And then for big budget 2025, we are still just at the governor's report has been published. We are waiting on the House to pass their version, and all appropriations bills have to start in the House. And so here we are on the ongoing base budget. We asked for an annualized amount to provide for a full year of operation of Grace's Place. So that would be an additional $4.75 million. So we will see what the House includes when they pass their budget, and just keep on having those conversations as needed. And then there also is an adjustment to increase funds to reflect, okay, so it is a 2-year lag, to increase funds to reflect the 2023 collections for the Safe Harbor Fund. So that's going to add another $54,120 onto that base $220-ish thousand. So you'll have more money to allocate next year. And that is it. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay. Well, that's my email. If you think of something later, feel free to reach out to me, or Emma and Emily can get you in touch with me if that's easier. And it was great meeting with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay. So we're going to move to the second presentation that we have for today. And now I'm going to ask Christy to be in the hot seat as she walks us through their updates.
Good afternoon, Commission members. Thank you, Commissioner Rose. We are excited to present our FY24 Safe Harbor Grant Program Fund Award recommendations to the full Commission today for approval. And I do have two of our team members, Amy Hutzel and Erica Atzenhofer, on with us also to respond to any questions you all may have. If you recall, in December of 2023, we met and reviewed a release for applications draft, and Commission approved that draft, which sets our funding priorities for the FY24 cycle. Those priorities mainly remain the same, one for our residential treatment facilities and safe home support, two for prevention and awareness, and then three for additional support for community-based services in our underserved populations. We had a due date of February 9th, 2024, and this would be for an award cycle that begins on March 1st of 2024 and ends on March 30th, 2025, as approved by the Commission again in our December meeting. We received 4 applications this cycle which requested $558,308. And if you recall, we had $310,790 to make recommendations for in this cycle. So the methodology that we took was we created a panel. The panel comprised of 2 of our internal CJCC staff members, and we also had 1 external reviewer. And then we also invited any interested Safe Harbor Commission members. So thank you to Ms. Judith Fouts, who attended our meetings and offered her ear and to lay eyes on applications, and as well as our DHS and DFACT representation. And so they also received those applications for review. At that point, we met to go over, our scorecards, how we would rank those responses, different comments that we would ask for reviewers to input, so that way we can provide technical assistance to any applicants in order to strengthen applications later on, and if they request to review those. And we had a final meeting after all applications were reviewed on Friday, February 23rd, to finalize those award recommendations. In the memo, hopefully you all received, you will see a chart that essentially lays out the agencies that requested funds, the amount that they requested, and then the recommended amount by the panel. We also include a project description and reviewer comments. So recommendations are as follows. 1, for Micah's Promise, who requested $100,000. We are recommending a $60,000 award, which is to partially support the cost of a psychiatric nurse position. The applicant's narrative indicated that should they not receive the full requested amount, that they would continue to fundraise at the local and state level to fully support the position. We do have a contingency for the commission to consider, in that we would create a specific performance report that would include a breakdown of data for what specific services each youth is receiving quarterly from that psychiatric nurse. The second is for Theros Place, which requested $85,005. The panel is recommending $70,000. The request was to fund its outreach team, which provides direct services to residents in training and education and awareness for the greater Savannah community. We're recommending partial funding to cover the cost of the outreach coordinator, which was supported during the last cycle, and a new volunteer services manager, and then also partial support for indirect costs, printing, and supplies. Third is a new applicant to the Safe Harbor Commission, but CJCC does have a prior standing relationship with this agency. It's Brightside Child and Family Advocacy. They made a request of $77,803. The panel is recommending full support of the $77,803. The request is to fund a position fully committed to the Hope Court down in Savannah. And Judge Fermi is on the call today. This position would supervise and train 10 to 15 CASA volunteers to participate in all Hope Court MDT meetings, provide additional case management directly to participants, and again, train CASA volunteers about human trafficking and trust-based relationship intervention, and then also submit referrals to Hope Court on behalf of the CASA program. Again, we are requesting and recommending full support of the $77,803. The contingency for this application would be that they need to complete the Human Trafficking Victim Assistance Organization certification process. And then our fourth and final application is for Wellspring Living, who requested the full $300,000, and the panel is recommending $102,987. This is again a request to fund and to serve private custody youth victims of all genders who are identified as CSAC victims. And this is for the Receiving Hope Center care to provide that emergency stabilization, medical care, residential services, case management, education, and therapy. While we are recommending partial funding, CJCC has been very supportive, and we will continue to look for additional resources to support this full request, as we know that this is a gap, and we will continue to look for a solution with other funding sources that we administer. So that brings us to that 310,790 allocation that we had, and my team and I are happy to respond to any questions.
So Christy, you actually had only 3 reviewers, correct? You said Judith.
She did not review, but she was in our meetings, and she did have access to all of those applications, but she did not score.
Okay, that was one of the questions that I had. Did we have anybody who actually applied but did not qualify or get any funding?
No, we only had 4 applicants this cycle.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anyone have any other questions or comments about the recommendations? Any revisions?
No, Chrissy, I think you did a good job of dividing it up so that everybody got a piece of the pie, so to speak. I guess I'm just a little confused with Melissa's presentation, where it said the total fund was $688,125. So what?
I think it covers 2 years.
Okay,
From
thank
our
you.
December meeting.
Okay.
So, right.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, well, if there's no additional discussion or questions, then at this time, if we want to move forward with accepting the grant program recommendations, then I can entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, and then Christy, just for the benefit of the record, could you just say the recipient's name and the total amount for each of the 4 before we take the vote?
Wellspring Living for $102,987. Brightside Child and Family Advocacy for $77,803. Thero's Place for $70,000, and Micah's Promise for $60,000.
Okay, and since we have the motion and a second, then all in favor of approving the 4 grant program recommendations, signal by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
It is unanimous. And the motion carries. Thank you so much, Christy, and everyone that was involved in the review process. We will start working through this to assist in any way to make sure that the grant funds are quickly provided to the recipients. And with that, then I think we will touch on what might be the last presentation for today's agenda. Let me make sure that Judge Formey is ready to go. How are you doing, Judge?
Hello. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. I apologize. I have a little bit of a frog in my throat, so if you don't understand me or hear me, please let me know. So thank you so much, Commissioner Gross and Commission, for having me come and talk to you about Hope Court, which is our joy here in Chatham County. And thank you to CJCC for constantly supporting the work that we're doing. We think it's really making a difference. And so I'm going to go through these slides. What I don't really want to do is talk at you. So if you have any questions, please chime in and ask if anything pops in your mind. But if not, I'll just kind of go through. So Hope Court is healing opportunities through positive empowerment. And we started, of course, in January of 2021, so we just turned 3 years old. And we are a treatment court that is designed to work with our youth who are court involved and have either been confirmed or at high risk for human trafficking. And that can be labor and or sex trafficking. We're different from an accountability court. I'm sure you've heard quite a bit about accountability courts around the state. We do not use accountability and sanction. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but we're a treatment-focused program. This is our mission statement. I won't read it to you, but generally just what we're trying to do is bridge gaps, because we know historically that systems haven't been able to work well together, and the services, there are a lot of gaps in that area, so what we've been trying to do is bridge those gaps for the benefit of our children. So these are just some stats from Chatham County from 2022. I know that CACGA is putting together the 2023 numbers, but Chatham County in 2022 was number 4 in the state for referrals for CSEC youth. We are now number 6, which I like to think is because of our work, hopefully, but it's still pretty high up there. And then some of the things that make Chatham County unique is that we are at the intersection of I-95 and 16. We're the 3rd largest and fastest growing shipping port in the nation. We have an international airport, a military base, but the most important thing is that our kids are Chatham County kids, and so we recognize that these are not necessarily youth that are being brought through our jurisdiction, but they're kids who live here, and we need to help them here. And so all of these things that identify Savannah as a popular place, people are coming here and unfortunately exploiting our youth. So I spoke about this at the beginning. We try to be as trauma responsive as we can. I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a moment as well. But again, a treatment court that is centralized around our youth and really trying to focus on what their needs are. So we started Hope Court basically because in the past, as you know, our juvenile justice system and our child welfare system, the kids were going through these systems without any special attention, and they were kind of getting treated the same, and we weren't getting a lot of positive responses. And so we understood that this level of trauma required a different level of care and attention. And again, we try to be innovative, try to use creative approaches, and try to use restorative work and goal setting in order to try to make kids feel whole again. We're talking about whole human beings. We're not talking about numbers or files or just kids who might otherwise get lost in the system. And so what we really try to do is identify the need and then try to meet that need. One of our mottos is small successes are big successes. And so, we see kids who have been victimized. Sometimes they don't go to school, or, maybe they're not engaging in any counseling. So if they do little things, if they're meeting their smaller goals, if they've made it from, go running away once a week to running away once a month, those are successes because they're just learning new patterns and they're able to respond in a different way. So we celebrate all of those things, just really trying to be strengths focused. So this slide is just kind of generally about what we do. So we use a multidisciplinary team, which of course is the model around the nation. I will say Hope Court is the first of its kind in Georgia, and it is the only one in Georgia, but it is one of about 15 similar courts around the nation. And so it is not an original idea in that sense. We modeled after Miami's Grace Court there. Fresno, California has a court that we modeled after, and also there's a Hope Court DC, no relation to the name. We try to be trauma-informed and trauma-responsive at our core. And so all of the people who work in Hope Court have been TBRI trained, trust-based relational intervention, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But it is a a relationship building approach. And so we try not to re-traumatize. The worst thing you want to do is be a secondary abuser. And so we don't use labels. We don't use language that is around criminal activity, that kind of thing. We don't stigmatize as well. And we certainly don't have any judgment in our space. I put the opportunity-based probation model, go back one more, sorry, on here because although we're not an official implementation site, we do recognize in the juvenile justice system that we need to do things differently. And so we use it as a general framework that focuses on reward and responsibility, which I think is really important. It's been shown through the evidence that if you show a child that the things they do that are good are in fact good, and focus on the good things that they do while also teaching them responsibility, that you can get better outcomes than just punishment alone. So just a little bit about TBRI, and I know it was mentioned a little bit earlier with the CASA program. There are three main elements to it that we use, and connecting principles, empowering principles, and correcting principles, excuse me. Correcting principles are pretty basic. How are you connecting with the kids, right? What are you doing to build that relationship? We find that the relationship is the number one thing that makes a child move forward. Engagement strategies that could be, maybe you guys like the same thing. Maybe you want to learn something about what they enjoy doing. Finding out what their goals are. What kinds of things do they want from themselves? Mindfulness strategies are being aware of what they've experienced and what they're experiencing now when you're engaging. And so if you are not paying attention to what a child is going through, you can't build a relationship with that. Empowering principles, which are my favorite, is about really just paying attention to what's going on around, right? So physiological strategies, what we need to know is that children who have not eaten or are thirsty or are tired, they cannot function and they cannot respond. These kinds of things will cause them to shut down. These things will cause them to act out. And so when we're talking about behaviors that appear to be problematic, what's causing that? We all know how we feel when we're hungry, right? We get a little angry. And so imagine a child who has not. So paying attention to that need and meeting those needs. So in Hope Court, one of the things that we do is we have snacks and we have water. And we have fidgets so they can play with while they're in the court. Ecological strategies are things like lighting, sound, smell, touch. There are a lot of things that can exist in a space that can be very triggering for children who've been victimized. And so being mindful of that, is there a smell that they recognize from a trafficking situation? Maybe it's a perfume or a cologne. Are there, certain loud noises that cause dysregulation? Just being mindful of all of those things, the things that are external to them. So empowering principles are about internal and external stimuli. It's interesting because we talk about our kids and we expect them to behave with healthy brains, right? And so I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of brain science with you guys, but this idea that we're expecting them to go from point A to Z in their day, and maybe they're stuck at C. And so understanding why they're stuck there and then trying to help them work through that so that you can get the outcome that you're looking for. So we chase needs and not outcomes. The correcting principles are when you have behaviors that appear to be problematic, how do you address those? What are the proactive things? What are the response things? Some of that just looks like play. Even our older youth enjoy a little banter, enjoy a little joke, card game. And then there's some structured responses as well. So those are the types of things that we start with our kids when we're interacting with them in Hope Court. So this is our team. We have a very large team. And if you can think of it, the person, they're probably there. Everyone from me to, we have a mental health clinician and an education advocate in our court. We have Hope Court case managers. We do not call them probation officers. We call them case managers. Of course, the child and their attorney, the public defender's office, and the DA are both at the table. CASA, each child who's in foster care right now gets a CASA. When we first started, every child got a CASA, even if they were not in foster care. But unfortunately, because they lost a few members, they had to reallocate. But hopefully, we'll be able to get every child a CASA again because they're so critical to the children's success. One of the things that we're working on right now is rebuilding our Survivor Mentor program. What we know is that is a piece that we cannot effectively operate without. And so we've been talking to some folks at the national level and the state level about implementing a more formalized Survivor Mentor program. We also have DFACS, of course, and our SAG is present at every hearing along with the children's case managers, which is so important because then we can all talk about what's going on with that child. I only see the child in court. The case manager, the DFACS case manager, they're the ones that are on the ground with them, and so their input is critical and vital. Each child has their own attorney. If they have a dependency and a delinquency, they get a public offender and a child advocate attorney. They also get an attorney guardian ad litem. We have our child advocate office who does our direct representation and our dependencies generally, but they serve as the attorney guardian ad litem in Hope Court. Our child attorney are dedicated attorneys from the University of Georgia's Cease Law Clinic. I know some of you may be familiar with them. And yes, they come all the way to Savannah, and they are looking for an attorney to be here in Savannah. So if you know anyone who's interested, they do the direct representation. Also, we have a law enforcement liaison. We are not a law enforcement court, but it is important that if we come up with names, addresses, certain facts, or things like that, that we communicate that to law enforcement, and then they also tell us of what things that they come across. We've developed, in probably about the last 6 months, a really good relationship with our Southern District U.S. Attorney's Office. And Jill Steinberg is our new U.S. Attorney down here, and she has a history with human trafficking prosecution and has done quite a bit at the federal level. And wonderful news is that they've been able to help us capture about 4 traffickers since they've started. So it's been a really amazing connection, and our kids are asking for it. At first, we were a little bit unsure how far we wanted to lean into that space, but as they get older, they've been asking. And so since they've been asking about what's happening with their traffickers, then we've made that connection. And of course, the parent and caregiver are part of the conversation and part of the court. We are developing our parent program. It is quite difficult sometimes to get the parent to understand that they just don't have a bad kid, that they have a traumatized kid. But part of that is that the parent hasn't dealt with their own trauma. And so we've got to meet the parents where they are in order to get them to help the children too. We have 3 phases, and you can see they're listed here. Now, the phases are a little bit fluid. Safety and planning is sort of that basic needs phase where the child comes in, what's going on? Do they have shelter? Who are their caregivers? What has been going on in the last 24 hours? Those kinds of things. We start to put initial goals like, how are we going to get you from today to next week? And then once they finish this first phase, this usually, I would say, lasts anywhere from 30 to 60 days, but some kids enter in and out of crisis regularly, so they may stay there longer. And we have to focus on their basic needs longer. Phase 2 is maintaining. That means they have been stable for a while. And while things aren't perfect, because oftentimes kids, will relapse and elope, or there may be a substance abuse issue or a counseling need that has broken down, we are measuring sort of where they are. And if they're there consistently, then they're in phase 2. Phase 3 is when they're starting to kind of mature, and we've seen some really great maturity out of some of our kids, and maybe they have a job, or they're going to school regularly, they're able to manage through their counseling, whatever's going on with them that they're gaining that sort of self-determination. That's the phase 3. And then there's aftercare, where we don't feel like they need us anymore, but if they do, they can call us. We're still here. And then they graduate. These are just some of our principles: a fresh start, safe haven, commitment to our youth, desire to be heard. Small successes are big successes again. And, we really need to really pay attention to our children's voice and ensure that they also have choice and that they feel like they have agency in the process. Because otherwise, what we've been doing before is we've been talking at them, not to them, and we've not gotten any results. And so they have to be the center focus of everything that we do. So how do you get into Hope Court? Any child that's under the jurisdiction of the Juvenile Court of Chatham County, that could be during your dependency, delinquency, child in need of services, or all three, doesn't matter. Males, females, and transgender. We actually have 2 transgender youth right now, and 11 females, 12 females, and 1 male. And you have to be either confirmed or at high risk for CSEC or labor trafficking. And then it's an opt-out program. So we started with saying that, it's voluntary, but who wants to volunteer to be in a CSEC court, right? So we say it's opt-out. So we put them in the court, and then they have the opportunity to opt out if, after everything that we've tried, either nothing is working or there's just something that we can't do anymore. And that does not mean that if they're on elopement status, because we have kids who call us even when they're gone. When they're missing from care, they call the person that they have the relationship with. And so that is not an opt-out reason. We've only thankfully had 1 child opt out in our 3 years, and that was a result of the parent not wanting to engage, and therefore the child didn't want to engage. And the more we tried, the more we thought we were making it harder on the child, and so we allowed the child to opt out. But we try our best. These are the stakeholders and collaborators that we have. You can see the list here. And if any of you have any organizations that would like to work with us, we are always open and really want people to join us and work with our kids. But this is kind of the long laundry list here. Viewpoint Health at the bottom is a care coordination entity. Y'all may be familiar with them, so they do some of that for us. And so that's all I have in terms of just the high level, elevator speech about Hope Court and what we do. But I would love to take questions and maybe just have a conversation about what we're doing here and why it's so important.
I've got one for you, Judge.
Sure.
So how has there been, has it been helpful working with local law enforcement and the district attorney's office? Have you been able to build those connections and see that those move forward in prosecution, or is it that it goes through a different unit, or is that still being developed as the court continues to grow?
So it kind of varies. The district attorney's office is at the table in the MDT with us, and we meet twice a month. And so they are there. And then, of course, the U.S. attorney's office. In terms of prosecuting the traffickers themselves, it's kind of out of our lane, but we try to provide as much information and try to be sort of a help and support where our kids are having to deal then with that process. Some of our jurisdictions are more responsive than others. Savannah, Chatham County area has Savannah PD, Chatham County PD, and then 6 smaller municipalities. And so the response varies based on the municipality. Our Savannah police and our Chatham County police are amazing. And it is primarily their SVU that manages the local stuff with the help of the U.S. Attorney's Office and the DA's office. I don't think that any of the traffickers have been prosecuted through our local DA's office. I believe they've all either been feds. I think they've been feds mostly, if I can recall. But the investigations do happen locally. We're still doing education with our municipalities as well. So it's a work in progress.
Thank you. That's really helpful because we're, at DFACS, we're trying to make sure that we have the best points of contact on the law enforcement side to coordinate on information that we find and we think could be helpful for it, also for recovery efforts. And so given that this court's been in operation for a few years now, I just wanted to get your tips, I guess, on ways to make sure that we're leveraging that as best as possible. Because we've had some great help from like Homeland Security, for example. They are very, very helpful in the Fulton County area whenever we're trying to coordinate recoveries. But we just want to branch out as much as possible.
I mean, our kids don't stay put, right? They travel. And so we have had some challenges in some of the jurisdictions that are north of Macon. And I don't want to sort of call out a county or anything, but we've had some problems with those police departments being responsive. I had one police department that refused to take a child to the Children's Hospital. Not sure why, but we had to transport them back to the Savannah Children's Hospital. They would not take them to CHOA. We've had to bring in CACGA a lot to kind of push law enforcement to respond, unfortunately. I think what has helped is I don't issue an arrest warrant when a child elopes. I issue a pickup order. And so in that pickup order, it says this child is a seaside child, which kind of for some reason the buzzwords get people's attention. So, and then the numbers that they would call. So whether that's their defects case manager, if they're in defects care, or their court case manager, or whoever the supervisor is. And that has been, I think, helpful for law enforcement to have a document in hand to say this is what I'm supposed to do with this child.
Real quickly, what is CACG? You said you had to get in touch with. What is that?
Sure. The Child Advocacy Centers of Georgia.
Did it help when you brought them in to help with law enforcement thoughtfulness?
Yes, absolutely. I think they do an amazing job educating on the spot.
Yeah.
They also do a great job getting in contact with emergency placements. I know in a couple of situations with RHC, they've been able to kind of just get on the phone. And so, yes, they've been an amazing resource for us and continue to be on many levels. They also do all of our assessments to determine whether a child is confirmed or not. And so in our process of the child coming in, we gather our information, send it all to them, and then they send it back to us to tell us whether the child would be eligible for support.
Candace, can I keep asking just one more question? Okay. I'm curious about your count, your census every year. You talked about, I think, 12 students, 12 females, 1 male. I mean, so you're serving around 15 students, I think. Is that, or children? What's yearly? Is that about the consistency? What's what does that look like every year?
Yeah, so since we started, we've had about 66 referrals. And so we've had 31 actual participants since we started, and then it depends on the child how long they stay with us, but we average about 15 to 20 active at a time, and then we get about 3 to 6 referrals a month. Our capacity, I never want to turn a child away, but we also have to think about our capacity to manage with our staff internally.
Is that your capacity then?
I'd like to say no. I think my staff would say something different. My coordinator would say something different. I think that we can effectively manage 20 to 25 with the help of all of the MDT people, with the CASA, with the guardian ad litem, the case manager, the defects case manager, working all together.
Y'all do amazing work.
Thank you so much.
All right, I have another one. So we're also trying to look at our existing defects policy, but even more so, just practice, actual practice, whenever we're trying to best serve suspected, exploited, or trafficked children, either before they're in our care or while they're in our care. And we're trying to view it through the lens of what is truly feasible in casework. And what would be if we had we only had 3 or 4 things that we could ask people to change about how they look at these cases and how they document them and the interactions they have with these children. What would those be? You know, the best bang for your buck, if you will, since like everyone, we're sort of resource constrained and we want to really make it count. What would you say are the areas where, if you could wave a magic wand, you would say, I wish that like DFACS would do these 3 things, or any community partner, if they could keep these things in mind to better serve these children?
So I think one of the things that I'm going to say is already starting to happen. We've gotten some new case managers in Chatham County who have just been phenomenal. And part of the reason why they're phenomenal is because they're paying attention. You know, and so I know that the workers around the state are overworked and overburdened, and there's so many kids. But the biggest thing is just to pay attention. That relationship with that child, no matter what's happening, if you have a relationship with them, you're going to get what you need from them. And I think just encouraging those who are on the ground to build a relationship and take the time to respond, to understand. I also think, education is extremely important. And so I would definitely recommend in all spaces, in all counties, that things like TBRI are implemented. CACGA can do their 101, 102 with, the local departments, just incorporating an understanding about these kids' special needs and complex trauma at the local level, I think would go a very long way. I would love to see, every county in Georgia kind of take on some level of specific CSEC response that is consistent across the state, because I find that people say, oh, we don't have that problem. I'm like, that's just because you either don't know or you're not paying attention. And so I think from leadership from DFACS down, I think the voice will be louder and it'll be heard more than me just saying, to my local case managers, hey, pay attention to this, this, and this. I think that, feeling supported because it's a difficult area, right? And so people run from it as kind of just an idea. And I'm not saying people should get comfortable with understanding human trafficking, but you should get comfortable with understanding human trafficking, because it'll change the way that you respond. You won't chase your tail as much if you understand what the needs are, if you understand what the complex trauma is. You'll be able to identify it and then meet the need, instead of trying to figure out, why is this kid busting a hole in the wall every hour, and now I've got to find a new placement. And so, yeah, so those are some of the things. And also with placements, I think getting them to understand that the police are not always the answer, that there are de-escalation techniques that will work, do work. And I think that will go a long way. It's not always about money, it's often, I'm not going to say it's not about money, because money is very important, but I think it all comes down to understanding, recognizing, and building relationships and working with the team. So it's interesting because traditionally, court systems and child welfare systems haven't really worked together, kind of worked in these parallel paths. And what we found is when we work together, we're working smarter, not harder. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those would be the things that I would point to as first steps to really creating systemic change.
Commissioner, can I ask a question that just kind of piggybacks on what you were just saying? And again, forgive me fully for not understanding kind of what DFACS does as far as the CSEC youth. Is there like a plan that y'all have about like how you deal with those youth in general? Or, I mean, I just don't know. Is that something that there is like a plan or something that y'all have?
Mm-hmm. We do, and we have it in, based on what exists in state law, essentially, for what we can do in these cases, we've got it in DFAC's policy. But I think it's no secret, so hopefully I'm not letting the cat out of the bag. But, you know, there's what's in DFAC's policy, and then there's sort of real world, what a case manager is able to do in the time that she has each day, especially for such complicated cases, because these always are. They're always incredibly complicated, and understandably so. So what we're trying to do is to look inwardly, and I've tried to get into the weeds of more specific cases myself, just to see, you know, how did we hear about this child? When someone contacted us and alleged abuse or neglect, did they even? Probably not, honestly. By the time you're hearing someone allege trafficking, when we look at the history, I could almost bet you're going to see some of the longest history of so many other complaints before someone finally says the word. But there are key red flags, I think, just from a practice perspective, hearing from courts, like Judge Formey, hearing from law enforcement, that we could change what we're looking for right out of the gate. So, you know, those MDTs that she referenced have been really amazing, because like the work that CACGA is doing, they're working with so many of these children before maybe they're ever even on our radar. So they have all this history, and they can tell us things, and associates and places and people that may have put the child at more risk, that if we know it looking at a complaint that we've received, or if the child's already in custody and hearing that they may be victimized, you know, that puts this way bigger picture together for us. So I think that might be, maybe we should invite CACGA to come in, because NAISHA is amazing and y'all would love to hear the work that they do. Because working with them has opened our eyes so much, and I'm trying to work through a checklist so we can do a better job working these cases.
And I just love to hear that. I mean, I know this morning I was dealing with a case where we have a case in juvenile court, and we have issues going on with mom, stepdad and mom, that we think are putting the child in danger, some potential traffic kind of issues. So we've now arrested them for different things, because we're trying to figure out what we can do. But then as far as the child, we're having some issues because of our age and all these things, and what our people are telling us what we can and can't do. And so anyway, it just happens to be totally on topic and not at all to do with what the commission is here for today. It just made me think of it, so I thought I'd ask. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to do things like make sure we're taking pictures every time we interact with this child. Make sure we're really documenting piercings and other things really well. If they mention someone that might be involved in exploiting them, like putting that in there. If a child runs, the missing reports, making sure we mention if there was another child that went with them, that we have that. Social media handles, but not to I think this is fascinating. Law enforcement tells us we don't need to be trying to contact these children if they're in our custody and they go missing and they have this history. We shouldn't be trying to find them on our own through social media, because if we know their accounts, we can ask them, you know, to run an exigence warrant and try to ping their location so they can go and do a better recovery. The minute we start reaching out, trying to do good old casework, right, could derail everything. And so just little things like that we're trying to learn could be practical changes into how we proceed.
Commissioner, if I may, one of the things that sort of popped into mind as well is that most of our kids want to be in what feels like a family environment. And so one of the things that would be really great is to try to recruit family foster homes that are specially trained to deal with the kids with this level of trauma. I can't tell you how many times, like, I just want to feel like a regular kid, right? I want to go to school like a regular kid. But they can't, because there's nowhere for them to go, or they're in a placement that has on-site education. And so they're not going to prom, and they're not, you know, going to the sporting events and not participating in activities that kids their age are, which the residential facilities are needed. But once they sort of step down from that, how do they, become whole individuals again? One thing I did forget, which was a really big deal, I think, about Hope Court, is that it's informal. And so if you step into my Hope Court space, I am not in my robe. I am not sitting on the bench. I convert my courtroom into what feels like a more circular environment. And when that child comes in, it is a review hearing, but there's no evidence that's presented. I'm not making any findings. We're just having a conversation. And so that's my opportunity to build the relationship that I was talking about. And so, yes, it feels weird when you walk in. You're like, where am I? This is not a courtroom, but it is. But we felt like it was really important to create a space where our kids felt comfortable, that wasn't sort of an us against them.
I love that, because it can be so daunting to just walk into, a marble courtroom, right? And be expected to fully cooperate with such traumatic events that have just occurred.
And you're sitting on a bench with a robe on. I love the concept of Hope Court. And I'm sure that is one of the things that makes your court so successful. And I've learned so much today. And you say you have capacity for 20 or 25 children?
I'd like to say I have capacity for as many as there are out there, but my staff would probably cap me at about 25. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it was daunting to me to see that y'all were planning, or the team is planning on recruiting and training 200 CASA volunteers. Can you touch on that a little bit? Is that Brightside?
It is. It's Brightside. Kate and I have had ongoing conversations about how important the CASAs have been. We've found that the CASA has been the primary person that our kids are connecting to. And so when they're in crisis, they're calling their CASA. Our CASAs have been sitting at the hospital when the child had to be hospitalized. They visit them if they're in the RYDC. They're driving up to their placements to meet with them and talk with them. And so that relationship has just been so critical to success, even beyond their court experience. And so in talking that through, we realized not just kids who are in foster care who need that level of relationship, it's all of our kids. And so being able to train our CASAs on how to manage this level of trauma, because it's hard, it's all consuming, it is overwhelming at times. I'm not going to speak through rose-colored glasses. There are times when I go home and I'm wondering why I still do this, but I go to sleep and I wake up and I do it again, because it's bigger than me. It's bigger than every one of us. And each one of those children deserves for us to pay attention to them as individuals. And our CASAs help us do that. They're part of the team. And they have a lay perspective that, just brings a different sense of understanding. And so everyone else in the room is clinical. They're a social worker, a lawyer, or, clinician. But the CASA is just a person. They're a member of society. And so that perspective is invaluable. So we'll train as many as we can, as fast as we can.
I think too, having multi-team training where you build those relationships between your DFACS worker and your CASA and your attorney, when you have those trainings together and they can actually talk, well, we got this going on. How can we best serve this child? And that was one of the things, and especially hearing your concept of your court, how you just sit around in a circle. I'm excited to hear about your program, and thank you. Glad y'all applied for some money from Safe Harbor.
Well, Brightside did, the court didn't, but definitely it will directly benefit us. And I certainly invite anyone down to come and sit and observe. Our kids are used to there being a lot of people around, so that's not such a big deal. We just warn them ahead of time that they're going to see a new face. So
Has this program been presented at any of your juvenile conferences around the state that you're aware of?
Yes, I presented at our judges conference in St. Simons last spring to all of our juvenile court judges, so they're all aware. If they tell you they're not telling the truth. I haven't
heard of it, and so I'm curious if my judges have. Okay. So that's all.
Okay. Yes. We are presenting at the Juvenile Clerks Conference next month. I've done a couple of virtual presentations, sort of just to random organizations who ask for it. Some foundations have asked for information. Our team, they go out and they do some community training as well. But as far as juvenile court, that's what we've landed.
And I want to say kudos to Commissioner Broche for trying to improve the services and those gaps there. That's encouraging too. To how can DFACS best work with these people and get that information across to know what needs to be done instead of it being several years and that child's needed something earlier, because it's hard to rebuild those children if we can intervene sooner than later when they're not as traumatized is a good thing. And thank you for that, Commissioner Broche.
Oh, I can't take credit for anything yet because we have a lot of work to do. Judge Formey, we have a lot of work to do, we'll tell you. But we're trying. We are certainly trying. So trying to look at some more tools to help us out. But especially out in that area, there I know firsthand of many cases where I feel like we could have done something very different much earlier, which we're going to learn from. But I feel good about the dedication that we have to it, especially because of entities like this one and the Hope Court. Everyone's really laser focused on trying to make this work more effectively.
And we have, and I'm also thankful to you because we have seen some changes and we have seen some better outcomes and better communication, not just, locally, but from the state level. And so we definitely appreciate the cooperation and collaboration.
I'm so glad to hear that. Okay. Well, does anyone have any other questions or discussion that they'd like to offer? Thank you, Judge Formey. This is so helpful. We really appreciate you doing this. Grant, you have something? You popped on.
I just have a closing comment because I didn't speak up during the legislative portion. Just want to thank you, Commissioner, and your team for all the work you guys have done on the legislation that you guys are advancing in coordination with DCH on the qualified residential treatment programs. I think establishing this new license designation will provide, much needed step down placement from PRTFs and helps to serve a very vulnerable population while leveraging increased federal funds with Title IV-E and Medicaid. So just wanted to note that that bill was moving on and that it's already passed the Senate and passed committee in the House. So kudos to the DHS team for their work on that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's going to be a great type of facility once it gets up and running because it will be another more sort of clinically and trauma-informed placement option, and certainly will serve sexually exploited and trafficked youth, not just in our custody. Eventually, it will also cover even children that are at risk. So it'll be additional options for more intermediate levels of care. And I will also, just because I want to make sure to tell the group, Grace's Place, the Gwinnett facility that was funded by the commission is up and running. They already have several, it's all young women at this point who have been placed there. They were all recently recovered from missing status. and they're doing very well. I think that probably we would immediately have enough people to occupy every single bed, but that's not what we're doing because they did just get started. So we're trying to phase in. But Grace's Place has already been a tremendous success. And it means that, you know, for the coordination we're able to do with law enforcement, especially for missing children in the Fulton County area, it's been a place that we can take them to after they go to CHOA to be assessed after recovery. So it's been a success story already. Okay. Yes, Irene?
Quick question. If you reported on this, forgive me, but the court case as it relates to the constitutionality of the fine, what happened with that? We talked about it at our last meeting. I was just curious if there's an update.
I haven't gotten one since we last were briefed by the Attorney General's office, right? So what we can do is, let me see if I can get Emma and Emily. Do you mind asking them for, okay, go ahead. Come on, Emily, you're muted for some reason. It says you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
I'll speak for Emily because I know what she's going to say. We just spoke with the Attorney General's office and they did not have an update for us, but we're going to continue to go back and forth with them and we'll keep you all updated.
I'm just curious about that. That's going to be a big deal when it happens.
They're optimistic, so they're still very optimistic.
Oh, I have a quick question. What was the bill number that Grant was referring to?
It is Senate Bill 377.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have a question about the court case. How long have we been waiting? It seems like it's been 4 years, like maybe 5. And I just don't understand. I don't understand how that's okay. I mean, I'm just being honest.
It's such a complex lawsuit because of the various claims and the entities that are involved in the litigation. I mean, it's just.
Can I say something?
Mm-hmm.
Since I work in the law field, it is just the process it takes to go through. You've got the initial court case, then it goes to appeals, and it comes back down to court, whatever the appeals say, and then it goes up to the Supreme Court, and then it just goes back and forth. And that's just the process. I've had cases that we're still in Supreme Court. We're at the final Supreme Court level that we've had going on for 10 years. So that's just the process. Hopefully it'll be heard this year and we'll have it wrapped up by the end of the year, this sex trafficking case.
I will say the appellate process has actually moved much more quickly than most do. I think where we sat was at the front end for a really long time. That's where it was sitting in front of a Superior Court judge. So I think that once that it has been moving, once a ruling was made, I actually think it's gone fairly quickly for the appellate part. If we look at how long that's been a very short amount of time. So I think once we got a decision, now it's really moving. And hopefully, based on what that last report we got, I think last time from the AG's office, hopefully within the next few months, we'll hear something additional. Because there are term limits and things on when the Georgia Supreme Court can rule on things, like once they hear argument, they have to rule within a certain time period. So we don't have those time limits in the lower courts. So I think that sometimes causes that delay.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Well, let's see. I think we're at closing comments. We may have just had our closing comments. Is there anything anyone would like to discuss before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Okay. Well, then if someone would like to move for adjournment.
I make a motion that we adjourn. It's been a great meeting. Thanks to everyone, especially the judge.
I second.
Great. Got a motion and a second. All in favor of adjournment, please signal by saying aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone. To all the presenters, thank you, Judge Formey. We really appreciate you, and we will see all of you next time. Have a good one.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.